Hi, I'm Mike with House on the Mend, and in this video with our ongoing series where we're rehabbing this house in Bullhead City, Arizona, we're going to be installing all the flooring in the bedrooms with this, the new Ryobi Floor Saw. So let's get started.
If you break it, he will fix it. If you buy it, he will build it. House on the Mend.
Now, I'm not sponsored nor paid by Ryobi. I bought this saw with my own money. Let's unbox it and see what comes inside. So this beautiful backdrop is our newly refurbished kitchen. Let's open up our package and see what's inside. Well, the first thing I noticed when I unboxed this saw that was very disappointing was they put this massive zip tie on right about here to keep the saw from moving during transport so tight, as you can see here, it even crimped it, that it cinched the wheels down on the slide rail and actually flattened them out. So now the wheels roll on here like a crappy shopping cart. Watch this. You hear that? It actually stops and you can feel it hitting the flat spot. Very disappointing. They really need to rethink that. They had a piece of styrofoam right in here to keep it from moving. They should have cinched that down instead of the rollers. It can be done better. Nonetheless, let's move on. Overall, I think you're going to be very impressed as I am. Now, this fixed rail right here is what the saw slides on, and that keeps it going right in this groove. The saw blade is going to be permanently 90 degrees from the work surface. Unlike a saw like this, the blade can't be pivoted from the base. It's no problem. I don't know why you would want to do that anyway. It's just something I wanted to point out. The blade guard is very innovative. It comes all the way down to protect your hands and to protect chips from flying out and also to assist with dust removal. But it's on a spring, so if you're using thicker material, look at that. It just slides diagonally up out of the way. So your work material would hit this little ramp and it would just slide up out of the way. Unlike a saw like this, where you have this bottom piece that you have to rotate to get your cut started, and then it rests on the wood the whole time. So that's pretty neat. So to make cross cuts, miter cuts, or rip cuts, you're going to need fences. And you might be wondering, hey, this looks a little bare, where are they? Check this out. You flip it up, and underneath you have a bunch of tools pre-stored in little clamps for you. So you've got your cross-cut or miter cut fence. This is going to be your rip fence. When you're doing rip cuts, it comes with a push stick to keep your fingers out of the way. And for changing the blade and making other adjustments, you have these little combination Allen wrench and Phillips head tools. On both sides of the rail, you have these little screws. These are going to be for your fences. And they just stow away right there. All right, the majority of your cuts are going to be cross cuts or miter cuts at the end of a run of flooring. This fence has a little set pin that goes right into place there. Then you have this little guy that goes right into a slot that will screw down and hold your flooring in place. And then this little screw that we pulled out goes right in over here, and you can tighten it down in anything from 0 all the way to a 45-degree cut. And when you look at the hash marks for the 15, 22.5, 30, or 45, there's a diagonal, and then there's also these little tails here at the end that are kind of confusing. Like, which do you line up the fence on? But if I take my speed square and I set the 45-degree side, you can see that on the 45, the 30, and so on, you want to set right on the diagonal line. If I were Ryobi, I would get rid of these little tails at the end. They just cause confusion. The saw comes with a dust bag. On the back of the dust bag, there's a zipper so you can pull it off and dump out the sawdust into a garbage can. And then that fits right on this dust chute here. But instead of using the bag, I'm gonna opt for dust collection with a cordless shop vac. So the one I have, you pull off the little brush and look at this, it's gonna fit right on there perfectly, and I'll be able to make my cuts while using a cordless vacuum. This tool didn't come with a battery, but I have plenty of my own, so it just clicks right into place up top. And then on either side of the battery, there's little tabs that you push in to release the battery. Now the little trigger has a safety that you need to push up and out of the way so that you can pull the trigger. And let's listen to what it sounds like. All right, that's pretty loud, so I'm going to be wearing hearing protection the entire time I'm using it. Now, let's pull the battery out so I can demonstrate this trigger a little bit more. This little button right here is the on lock. So once you move the safety, pull the trigger in, you can push in on the on lock, and the unit will run until such time as you push the trigger, which releases that, and then release the trigger. Now that's going to be useful when we are doing rip cuts, and let's talk about that next. So the majority of the time you are going to be going across the room, laying down the flooring, and when you get to the end wall, you're going to need to mark and cut that piece so that it will fit towards the end wall, and then you take the remaining piece and you start your course back at the front again. But when you get to the end of the room, you're going to come to a situation in most cases where you need a piece that is less than the total width of the board. And that is a type of cut called a rip cut. So let me show you how to do that. First, we'll want to remove the miter or crosscut fence. Then we're going to come in with the rip cut fence. Same thing, there's going to be 2 locator pins that go right into this slot here, and that is going to lock you in up to, what are we, like 4.5 or so inches away. So let's just set it up someplace. Same pin goes in to lock it in. Now, you no longer want the saw to freely move, so there is this hole right here where a corresponding lock pin will lock the saw into place. And now you are set up for rip cuts. And you would come in here with your workpiece, slide it through the saw this way to get whatever size you need to finish up. Now, if you're worried about your work kicking back at you, they have these anti-kickback pawls that are spring-loaded, really aggressive teeth on them, and you just simply unscrew this little knob here, or loosen it I should say, and set that down so it'll grip the wood, tighten it into place, and now as you're going through, if anything binds up, it should hold it in place. Now personally, I think this laminate flooring we have is so smooth that that's not going to do anything for us as far as gripping for throwback. So we'll just be really careful when it comes time to make rip cuts. I do like that right here behind the saw blade there is a riving knife. And a riving knife is simply a piece of metal that is close to the thickness of the saw blade, and it's right behind so that as you make a cut in the wood, both sides of the wood can't come back together and start pressing against the saw blade. That happens a lot with natural woods. as you get the grain going through, some pieces want to constrict like this after they've made a cut, and that can burn the wood. So the riving knife holds that cut the same width as the saw blade the entire time and keeps that from happening. It makes for a cleaner cut. Now when it comes time to change the blade, this blade guard has a little hinge on the back here, so it pivots out. And each of these 3 screws unscrew and allow you to twist the cover out of the way to gain access to the saw blade and the arbor. Now the nice thing about these screws is they're captive, so they won't come out. Now the arbor size on this is 10 millimeter, and that's talking about the circular hole in the saw blade itself. But if you buy a replacement and it happens to be the more common size of 5/8, that's no problem. They supply you with this 5/8 arbor for those size blades. So to remove the blade, just like almost all circular saws and also angle grinders, there is a button right here that you press in, and that will lock the blade so it doesn't rotate. Boom, there it goes. Now you can take your multi-tool that is included and you go the opposite of the normal lefty-loosey, righty-tighty because of the cutting direction of the blade. So what feels like should be tightening is actually loosening this screw, so it's backwards threaded. You pull off that little washer and the blade comes out. And yeah, that is a really small little hole. I would imagine most of the saws you're going to buy will have a 5/8 arbor, but that's no problem. You take this guy off and you set the other one that comes with it into place. Now the first thing you want to do when bringing in your flooring is to cut open the boxes to allow the flooring inside to acclimate to your humidity level. Next thing you want to do is prepare your subfloor by sweeping and or vacuuming it to make sure there's no debris underneath the eventual flooring. After that, you need to choose an underlayment. So for our case, we have concrete foundation, therefore we need 2 types of underlayment. We need a vapor barrier first, and then on top of that, some sort of padding to deaden the sound and cushion the walk a bit. In most cases, you can buy an underlayment like I did that's both a plastic vapor barrier and a foam padding. Let's test out the saw by first cutting some spacers out of this piece of scrap wood. So take a look at these initial cuts with the saw blade. Very clean. There's no chip out whatsoever on what was the top and then the bottom surface. Very clean. So there's no right or wrong which direction you have your boards run. Personally, I like to have leading lines leading me into each bedroom. So I'm going to start on this wall over here and we're going to work our way across. So what you see right here is the casing that goes all the way around the closet. And the closet doors actually come to close on this casing. So rather than cutting back the flooring so that we can push in tighter to the wall, it's a lot easier to take a flat saw, or if you have a multi-tool, and cut back that portion of the casing so you can slide your flooring board right into its place. So to make sure we don't make any damage to the top surface, we'll just flip this guy over, set it right there on the spot, and start cutting. And there we go. All right, let's set our first piece. I got a spacer over here against the back wall of the closet, a spacer here, and a spacer here. All right, we're over to the corner. Time to make our first cut. Now, I strategically planned out the length of the first piece down there so that this end piece would be at least 12 inches in length. So you could just take that measurement and transfer it over to your piece, but once you get into a groove, it is a lot easier to take the next piece, flip it over, line it up, and make your mark. Then line up that mark with your saw blade and away we go. And there we go, that piece fits perfectly. You probably can't see it in the camera, but here's our seam right here. Now, the cutoff from this piece right here becomes the first piece and the next course down at the other end. And now every single seam will be off by 12 inches, which is good. So with no help from Juno, we're about halfway through, 287 square feet we have cut so far, and the blade is dulling to the point where the sawdust is starting to burn, and it is getting noticeably more difficult to push material through in table saw mode. On 1 out of every 2 or 3 miter cuts, the saw locks up halfway through the cut because this locking pin here that's meant to set it into table saw mode is engaging on its own. It is really annoying and a serious design flaw. So we're at a point in this room where the wall angles off at almost a 45-degree angle, and we're going to need to start cutting the boards from this point on at that angle so that we can stay close enough to the wall where the baseboard will cover it. So if we take this next piece and we slide it up here, we can tell that right here is the corner where we're going to want to start making that angled cut. Well, Saker sent me this awesome tool. You may have seen these before. These are to help you with miter cuts, but they're also very useful for this kind of a thing. So if we set this against this wall so that both sides line up just right, we can see that for a single cut, we are right at about 48 degrees. So now I'm going to line up right there. And there's our cut, and the next several courses will also start with that same cut. All right, so the max that this little miter saw fence will go is just beyond 45 degrees, but as you can see here, that's going to be pretty close. All right, let's see how we did. Nice. Well, room number 2 is done. All these specialty cuts here at the end take time, but I think it looks good, huh? So as you come up to an end piece that terminates at an unknown angle, a very easy way to figure out just how to make this piece is to go from this edge, the showing edge of the previous piece, and measure off to the wall, 5 inches there. Come out here, ride right along this edge, and you got 12.5 inches there. Then you take a fresh piece, come up to the exposed edge, measure off of there, 5, 12.5. And there we go. Now, besides Juno sitting in the doorway, these are the things that also slow down our progress. There is packaging glue from the box all over the end seams. And then these are all damaged from shipping. So we are a little over halfway done with the 3rd bedroom here, the master bedroom, not including the walk-in closet. And for reference, we are just finishing off our 2nd battery. So we've had one 3 amp hour, one 4 amp hour battery depleted so far. Now, while in table saw mode, the saw has been sliding back and forth this way, actually quite a bit. The little feet don't really grip this smooth flooring very well. But my point is, when you lift up the saw, you can see this concentration of whatever isn't getting picked up by the vacuum and the dust collection system. So it is not flinging debris all over, it's falling straight down. So I really think they did a good job in designing this dust collection system. So after installing 3 bedrooms worth of flooring, I think I've gotten a pretty good idea of the pros and cons of this saw. So let's go over them. First of all, the pros. Ease of use. This saw is, like most Ryobi tools, very easy to use. The button layouts and things are very intuitive. I enjoyed using it. Also, the portability with the handle and with the lightweight, moving it around was very, very easy. I love the fact that you can do both your typical miter cuts, which are your cross cuts, and then also you can set up the rip fence and do rip cuts all with the same tool. Just fantastic. The angle and distance markings are all very accurate. Made it a lot easier to set up for angled cuts, as well as setting up the rip fence for rip cuts. The dust collection worked very well. I really liked how low down the plastic guard came on the blade, allowing the little port back here to really do its job in sucking up a lot of the dust and debris. Now, with that being said, I didn't use the bag that comes with it. I used a small portable electric vacuum, so your results may vary if you don't use a vacuum. Next, the part storage. Other than the little arbor that came with it, if you have a different type of saw blade, there is a place for everything on this saw, and I think that's really well thought out. I found the battery life to be really good. Now on the box, it claims a bunch of cuts with one battery. That is a 9 amp hour battery, which I don't have, but I went through about 2.5 4 amp hour batteries. I think I had 1 3 and 2 4 amp hour batteries that I used. And as you can see here, I've got about 2 bars left on this one. I do think that the more ripping you do, the less battery life you're going to have. So if all you're doing is cross cuts, i.e. miter cuts, the battery's gonna last a lot longer, but nonetheless, good battery life. Now the cons, and I actually only have 3. First of all, the blade quality. Now most Ryobi and rigid power tools that I've purchased in the past have come with really good quality blades that last a long time. This flooring saw, however, came with a very substandard blade that dulled quickly. So about 1.5 rooms in, I noticed that the cut was no longer clean. It started having a lot of tear out. There was the odor of the flooring burning, and you could see the burn marks on the cuts themselves. So those are all indicative of a saw blade that has gone dull. I did actually end up finishing the entire 3 bedrooms with the same saw blade, but nonetheless, I think it should have stayed sharper longer, and that speaks to its low quality. Next will be my chief complaint, which is the locking pin. This pin is meant to lock the saw into a stationary position for doing rip cuts. Now, I like that feature. However, the design of the pin just pivoting kind of very easily on its own is a flaw. It should be corrected. Maybe they could indent the plastic or something to keep that pin in more of a locked open position, so it's not constantly clicking into the lock position as you're trying to go through the material to make a cross cut. Lastly would be the feet on the bottom of the saw itself. I found that to be very slippery when I had the saw in rip cut mode. So as I'm pushing the material through the saw, it was sliding away from me. And I had to concentrate not only on keeping the laminate material against the fence for a good clean cut, but also in holding the saw stationary so it wouldn't slide away from me. I think it's kind of a safety concern. Admittedly, I was resting the saw on top of the flooring we had already installed, which is very smooth flooring, but it's a flooring saw. They should have anticipated that. And I would like to see them put some kind of more grippy material, or at least put a texture or a softer type of rubber foot so that it holds down on the laminate flooring better. Now, with all those things considered, I would have no problem recommending this saw to a professional or a DIYer. It did a great job and definitely has a place in a professional tool selection, and will be very convenient for you, I think, if you install some flooring at home. So if you found this video helpful, will you please give it a thumbs up? It really helps the algorithms to start suggesting it to more viewers like you. Also, please consider subscribing. I'm working really hard to put out good quality content and tool reviews, and there's more videos to come. I'll leave a link for this saw as well as everything else I used in this video. Now, full disclosure, other than this saw, which is available at Home Depot, everything else will be Amazon affiliate links. So if you click on them and end up making a purchase, it won't cost you a thing, but I do get a small reward at the end of the month. It helps to justify all the extra time it takes to set up the camera and the lighting and the audio to make these videos during a pretty intensive bit of flooring install. Speaking of intensive installs, the next thing we're going to do is install the baseboards in the house. So I hope you'll tune in for that episode as well. Until next time, thank you for watching. While I had to reach over and that all sounds stupid.